In the quiet depths of the ancient forest, long before footsteps or names existed, there lived a breath older than language. It was not a deity, nor a creature, nor a force that sought worship. It was the soft pulse of the land itself, a presence that shimmered between emotion and nature, forming a consciousness that did not think in words, but in sensations. The first Kodama was born from that breath, a spirit woven into the rings of a tree so old it had forgotten the moment it first reached toward the sky. And as centuries drifted by like slow-moving clouds, more Kodama awakened, each one tied to a sacred tree, each one carrying fragments of memory, longing, and the forest's deepest desires. To enter this forest is to step into a realm where the boundaries between self and landscape become porous. The air does not simply sit on the skin, it caresses, recognizing the warmth of a living body and responding with its own subtle warmth. Moss does not merely cushion a step, it receives it, as though greeting a traveler who has been expected for too long. The gentle shimmer of morning light filters through layers of leaves, bending, softening, lingering as though it wishes to remain pressed against bark and branch. In this place, nature feels, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but with an ancient sensitivity that reaches beyond the human senses. The Kodama are the heart of that feeling. They are said to be the guardians of the forest, though the word guardian fails to capture their essence. They do not protect the forest out of duty. They are the forest's heartbeat, its quiet exhalations, its intimate memories carried within every tree trunk. To sense a Kodama is to feel a whisper slip beneath one's consciousness, a delicate presence observing, listening, responding. They rarely show themselves in a visible form, for their nature is woven too tightly into the living wood. Instead, one perceives them through sensation, an unexpected warmth near the roots of an ancient cedar, the gentle rustling of leaves when no wind touches the branches, the soft impression of being watched with tenderness rather than suspicion. The forest they inhabit is alive with emotional nuance. It hums softly with remembrance, for it has witnessed countless seasons, storms, tender beginnings, and quiet endings. When a traveler's footsteps reach its threshold, the forest tilts subtly in their direction, as though tasting the feeling carried in their chest. If the heart is heavy, the air deepens, pressing close, offering a quiet embrace. If the traveler is curious, the shadows brighten, taking on a soft gleam like eyes opening in welcome. And if the traveler's spirit is restless or lonely, the forest responds with a gentle stirring, an echo of longing rising from the soil. This sensuality is not overt, not forceful. It is the sensuality of presence, of being enveloped by something ancient and alive. The brush of branches overhead feels almost like fingers trailing across skin. The subtle warmth radiating from a tree trunk resembles the nearness of a body. Even the soft glow of bioluminescent fungi clustered at the base of certain trees seems to pulse in a rhythm that matches the heartbeat of anyone who stands close enough. In this world, nature does not simply exist. It interacts, listens, remembers, and reacts to desire and emotion. The mythology of the Kodama draws power from this delicate intermingling of worlds. Humans have always sensed that forests possess a kind of soul, but the Kodama embody that soul in its purest, most intimate form. They are shy, elusive, and easily disturbed. To harm a tree that houses one is to disrupt the delicate balance of the world. The forest may fall silent, life may wither, and misfortune may seep into the land. But to honor a Kodama, to acknowledge its presence without demanding that it reveal itself, is to become part of a deeper understanding, one that blurs the line between the mortal and the spiritual. Stories passed from generation to generation speak of rare moments when a Kodama's presence grows particularly warm, lingering near a traveler with an emotion that feels almost like curiosity or longing. Such a sensation has been described as a brush of breath against the neck, a tightening of air as if invisible arms were drawing close, or a subtle vibration beneath the soles of one's feet, like the forest's heartbeat syncing with one's own. Those who have felt this often report an overwhelming tenderness rising within them, as if the forest itself were reaching out to soothe the wound they had not known they were carrying. It is in this delicate space where the myth becomes addictive, for there exists an ancient whisper, a rumor hidden in the folds of time, that once, long ago, a bond formed between a human and a Kodama that surpassed the boundaries of their worlds. No one knows the details. No chronicle has preserved the full tale. What remains are fragments. A traveler who carried great sorrow. A tree spirit who reached out with an emotion too vivid to contain. A connection that was forbidden yet irresistible. The very idea of such a bond lingers in the air, electrifying the forest with silent yearning. And because of that whisper, the forest invites anyone who steps into it to wonder whether such a connection might still be possible.
To understand the Kodama is to understand that nature itself desires harmony, intimacy, and resonance. Trees remember decades of sunlight, storms, and the gentle weight of snow on their branches. Soil remembers the warmth of countless footsteps. Rivers remember the trembling excitement of spring. And so the forest remembers emotions as well. Joy carried in laughter that echoed through its paths. Grief spilled in tears that soaked into its roots. Longing released in sighs that softened the air. The Kodama absorb all of these memories, holding them within their quiet spirits. In this myth, the forest is not simply the backdrop. It is a living being, a vessel shaped by memory and desire, by cycles of loss and renewal. When a traveler enters with an open heart, the forest responds, leaning closer, listening more deeply. Even the silence feels textured, as though full of breath. And when the Kodama stir, when their presence shimmers at the edge of perception. The forest's emotion rises like a tide, inviting the traveler to step into a connection older than language itself. The introduction to this myth invites the listener to stand at the threshold of that world, a world humming with possibility, trembling with mystery, pulsing with soft sensuality. The forest waits, breathing in slow, deliberate rhythms. The Kodama watch from their hidden sanctuaries, sensing every shift of atmosphere, every flicker of feeling. Something ancient stirs beneath the surface, awakening as if recognizing a familiar soul approaching after centuries of quiet yearning. And so the story begins with a whisper, an invitation woven into leaves, branches, and shadows. A promise that what lies ahead is not merely a tale of spirits in trees, but a journey into the emotional core of nature itself. A journey where desire flows like sunlight filtering through canopy, where intimacy blooms in stillness, and where the connection between human and Kodama may once again take form, trembling with the weight of what should not be touched, yet cannot be resisted.
They say that every Kodama begins as a whisper within a seedling, a delicate spark of awareness that grows as the tree grows, deepening with every year that the roots drink from the earth and the branches taste the wind. Among the countless spirits scattered through the ancient forest, one Kodama stands apart, subtle, sensitive, and far more attuned to emotion than most of its kin. Its tree is an old Zelkova, tall and elegant, rising with a curvature that seems almost like the arch of a back leaning into sunlight. The bark shimmers faintly when touched by dawn, and its leaves tremble with a softness that suggests breath. This Kodama has no name, for names belong to beings who live in the linear flow of time. Spirits such as this exist in sensation, memory, and instinct, not in the constraints of language. Though formless to the eye, the Kodama's presence can be felt as a faint warmth blooming around the tree's trunk, a soft pulse that lingers just beneath the perception of the mind. When it is calm, the air around its tree feels like a quiet sigh. When curious, small rings of pressure ripple outward, stirring leaves in gentle patterns. And when moved, when struck by emotion that rises like a sudden wind, the forest around it seems to thrum in response. The Kodama feels deeply, perhaps too deeply. It absorbs the forest's sorrows and joys, and each passing century etches those emotions into its quiet essence. There is a vulnerability in that depth of feeling, for though the Kodama is bound to an immortal tree, its spirit bruises easily, as though made of the thinnest glass. Its desire is subtle and instinctive, to be understood, to feel another presence that resonates with it on this emotional plane. But the Kodama knows that contact with mortals is delicate, dangerous. Humans burn bright and hot. Their lives are brief, but their emotions are sharp. For a being made of breath and memory, a human's presence can feel like fire. Warming, yes, but also capable of leaving scars. And yet, despite this innate caution, the Kodama has always sensed a distant yearning,
a quiet curiosity that pulses through its core whenever the forest stirs in response to the outside world. The human drawn into this story arrives not with the energy of someone seeking legends, but with the softness of someone carrying a quiet ache. Their name is unimportant here. What matters is the pulse of their spirit. They come into the forest not chasing myths, but searching for a silence they have lost. They do not speak of the wound they bear. It lingers behind their ribs like a shadow, tender and unresolved. Something in their life has frayed, a bond broken, a dream lost, a burden carried alone for too long. And although they do not voice this pain, the forest senses it instantly.
The Kodama senses it too. Even before the human reaches the clearing where the old Zelkova stands, the Kodama feels their presence like a tremor beneath the soil. A warmth tinged with sorrow, with longing, with the soft exhaustion of someone who has tried too hard for too long. The Kodama recoils at first, startled by the sharpness of the emotion drifting its way. But as the human steps deeper into the forest, something unexpected stirs within the spirit. A curiosity, gentle but insistent. The forest leans inward, carrying the human scent, the faint mix of skin, memory, and rain-dampened clothing. And the Kodama absorbs it with a trembling kind of wonder. Unlike the spirit, the human is fragile and fleeting. The forest can sense the heartbeat within them, irregular, shifting with every thought. It feels the rise and fall of their breath, the heaviness behind it, the vulnerability they try to hide. And when they pause at the edge of the Zelkova's clearing, something about their stillness strikes the Kodama deeply. They stand as one who has been searching without knowing what they seek. The Kodama approaches, not visibly, not in form, but in sensation. The air around the human thickens slightly, warming with a presence that feels like an exhale brushing their skin. Leaves tremble overhead, though no breeze passes through. The human's pulse quickens, sensing something unseen, watching them with gentle attention. Their reaction is not fear, but wonder. This response draws the Kodama closer. It circles around them as a shift in atmosphere, as if the forest were adjusting itself to accommodate their presence. The human lifts their hand and grazes the rough bark of the Zelkova. Immediately, a ripple goes through the Kodama, an involuntary tremor, delicate and startling, like a shiver in a being that has never known touch. Here begins the pull between them, the contrast that defines their connection. The human is mortal, warm, immediate, full of emotions that flare swiftly and brightly. The Kodama is ancient, contained, restrained by centuries of quiet endurance. Their essences brush against one another like two different temperatures meeting in the same breath. The human brings movement, the spirit brings stillness. The human carries wounds, the Kodama carries memories. Where one trembles from the inside, the other trembles from the outside. The Kodama does not know why it lingers close to this traveler. Spirits do usually hover near mortals. Their energy is too erratic, too heavy. But something about this one is different.
They do not ask. They do not demand. They simply feel. And the Kodama is drawn to those feelings like light drawn to the surface of water.
In turn, the human finds themselves inexplicably comforted by the atmosphere surrounding the tree. It is a strange comfort, not a soothing they can explain medically or logically, but a deep settling in their chest, as though something inside them has finally exhaled after years of holding tension. They feel watched, yes, but not judged, observed, but gently. A presence near them seems to respond to every shift in their emotions, amplifying or softening the sensations like a silent companion. This unspoken intimacy forms before either fully understands it. The forest pays close attention. It feels the Kodama's stirrings, the subtle shift in the old Zelkova's life force. It feels the human's trembling curiosity. The balance begins to sway, not yet dangerously, but noticeably, like a delicate bridge beginning to take on weight it was never meant to bear. And yet, the forest does not interfere. Something in the way these two beings orbit each other feels natural, fated, inevitable. The Kodama's vulnerability deepens with every passing moment. It is not built for contact. It is built for observation, for quiet harmonizing. But the human's emotions flow outward like waves, brushing against the spirit in ways that send soft tremors through the clearing. The Kodama feels exposed, as though its inner world, hidden for centuries, is suddenly illuminated by the warmth of someone who doesn't even realize they are touching it. Meanwhile, the human feels a strange pull toward the tree, a sense that something invisible leans near them, breathes with them. They find themselves speaking softly, half sentences, fragments of thoughts, without knowing why. Words fall from their mouth with a gentleness born of vulnerability, confessions that barely cross the threshold of sound, truths not yet fully formed. The Kodama listens, absorbing each syllable with a quiet intensity that makes the air shimmer faintly. No visible figure appears, no shape steps forward from the shadows, but the presence grows, curling around the human like a faint warmth rising from the earth. It is not sensual in a physical sense. It is sensual in the emotional resonance that forms when two beings, entirely different in nature, begin to sense each other's longing. The Kodama desires understanding. The human desires to be seen. The forest desires balance. And within these overlapping desires, something begins to take shape. A bond as fragile as a dewdrop balanced on a leaf, yet filled with the potential to alter the rhythm of the ancient woods. The Kodama leans closer without moving. The human lingers without leaving. Two worlds, long separated by the boundaries of flesh and spirit, stand now on the cusp of touching. Neither fully understands what draws them together, but the pull is unmistakable, and it is only growing stronger. From the moment their presence is first touched, one human, one spirit, the forest felt its own balance shift, as though a new rhythm had begun pulsing beneath its soil.
It was subtle at first, like a faint echo beneath a heartbeat. Yet for the Kodama, that shift was profound. The spirit had known centuries of stillness, moving only in response to the forest's needs. But now, it found itself attuned to something else, the fragile, flickering light of the human's emotions, a warmth that beckoned, a longing that stirred, a wound that resonated like a tender bruise pressed beneath the spirit's awareness. The Kodama did not understand desire, not in the human sense. It knew yearning only as an instinctual pull toward harmony, a need to soothe, to balance, to listen. But this was different. This sensation carried an ache. It made the spirit expand and contract in strange rhythms as though trying to match the human's breath. It felt the traveler's loneliness as if it were a change in the forest's temperature. Their sadness rippled through the air like the tremble of a leaf before it falls. Their curiosity was warm, almost radiant, drawing the Kodama forward even though it had no legs to walk with and no voice with which to speak. Yet every time the spirit reached closer, the forest tensed in warning, for the Kodama was meant to remain unseen, to reveal itself fully, even through sensation, risked unraveling the delicate equilibrium that held the ancient woods in harmony. The mortal's presence was allowed. Mortals had always wandered these paths, but intimacy between mortal and spirit was another matter entirely. The forest, aware of the Kodama's trembling fascination, sent soft gusts of wind through the clearing, stirring the leaves in tones of caution. The branches of nearby trees creaked softly, as though whispering to the spirit to retreat, to remember its purpose. But the Kodama did not withdraw. It lingered near the human, drawn like a moth to warmth. The air around the traveler thickened with its presence. When the human's fingers brushed the bark of the Zelkova again, a touch so gentle, so reverent, the Kodama shuddered through the roots, a pulse spreading outward. It was too much, too intimate. The spirit felt exposed, aflame with an emotion it could not name. The humans sensed the tension. They felt the sudden shift in the air, the trembling of leaves above. For a moment, they stepped back, unsure if they had crossed an invisible boundary. But the moment they retreated, a wave of quiet sadness rippled outward from the tree. The Kodama had not meant to send it. It was simply the truth of its feeling, a soft ache of separation, of distance it did not want.
The human froze, their breath catching. Slowly, tentatively, they reached out once more, not touching the bark this time, but merely hovering their hand above it. And the forest responded. The space between skin and wood warmed faintly, as if something invisible was leaning into that potential touch. This was the first barrier, the first forbidden threshold. To touch the tree too boldly would be to disrupt the Kodama's essence, yet to withhold that touch entirely felt like a denial of the connection forming between them.
The human felt the tension clearly, an emotional gravity pulling them forward and backward at once. They whispered in apology, though they did not know to whom they were speaking. The Kodama felt the vibration of the words, soft and trembling, and the forest absorbed them with a hush. That whisper pulled the spirit closer, even though every rule of its existence urged it to retreat. The conflict deepened with silence, for the Kodama's world was built on silence, on the unbroken stillness that allowed the forest to breathe. The human, however, carried noise inside them, thoughts, emotions, memories, desires, not spoken aloud, but loud enough that the Kodama felt them like waves of heat and chill. The human wanted connection, though they did not admit it even to themselves. They wanted understanding, solace, something to replace the emptiness carved into their heart. And the Kodama wanted to offer these things, yet feared the consequences of doing so, for the forest had turned uneasy. The light dimmed as clouds passed overhead. Leaves rustled in warning, though no breeze stirred them. Even the animals retreated, sensing the delicate tension. There were rules older than myth. A Kodama could not let itself be seen or physically touched, for its spiritual tether to the tree was fragile. Too much disturbance, too much closeness could sever that bond. And yet the Kodama lingered dangerously near, driven by a desire it did not understand. This desire was not physical. It was a yearning to be felt more fully, to be acknowledged not as a ghostly echo, but as a presence with meaning. The human, unaware of the forest's warnings, stepped closer again. Their breath brushed the bark, their heartbeat quickened, their emotions swelled with quiet need. The desire to feel connected to something larger, something alive, something that listened without judgment. And the Kodama felt these emotions wash over it, pulsing with soft light deep within the tree's core. If the human had pressed their ear to the trunk, they might have felt a faint vibration, like a heartbeat aligning with their own.
But the moment teetered on the edge of danger. The forest intervened gently at first, a branch lowered overhead, brushing the air like a hand placed between two beings whose closeness threatened a fragile balance. Roots tightened beneath the moss, sending quiet signals to the Kodama. Stop. Pull back. This path leads to disruption. The Kodama hesitated. It loved the forest, its home, its body, its memory. But something about the human's presence called to a part of the spirit that had been dormant for centuries. A desire to know, to connect, to soothe and be soothed. This longing was subtle but constant, like an ache that grows slowly, shaping itself around the heart. The human felt this hesitation, though they could not name it. A sudden coldness passed through the air, raising goosebumps along their arms, a warning, perhaps, or an invitation. They stepped even closer, feeling as though something important hung by a thread between them and the ancient tree. This was the second barrier, the emotional one. The human carried pain, but beneath that pain was a desire for closeness that frightened them. The Kodama sensed this fear just as clearly as the longing, and the mixture of the two sent a tremor through the roots. The spirit did not know how to approach something so complex. Human emotions were wild things, beautiful, unpredictable, and deeply dangerous to a being made of balance. The forest trembled softly, sensing the spirit's distress. Yet it did not force the Kodama away this time. Perhaps it sensed that both beings needed this encounter, even if it risked unsettling the ancient order. Perhaps even the forest, with all its wisdom, understood that some connections, once sparked, are impossible to extinguish gently. But still the tension thickened. A misunderstanding took root when the human placed both hands on the tree, palms flat, as if seeking comfort or offering it. The Kodama recoiled in alarm, not because it feared the touch, but because the intensity of contact threatened to unravel it. A sharp jolt rippled through the clearing, sending leaves spiraling downward like startled breaths. The humans stepped back, heart pounding, unsure whether they had done something wrong. The Kodama's sorrow swelled instantly, a wave of distress that softened the air with a feeling of apology. This push and pull became the essence of their bond. Longing met with hesitation, approach met with retreat. Each gesture deepened their desire, heightened their caution, and spun the air between them into a charged space thick with unspoken questions. The human longed for comfort. The Kodama longed for connection, but the forest demanded balance. And caught in the center of these conflicting needs, desire intensified. Not desire of body, but desire of presence, of feeling another soul drawn so closely they might touch without touching, understand without speaking, breathe without fear. Something fragile connected them now, trembling like a spider's thread in wind. It could break at any moment. And the possibility of that breaking, the risk of harm, the fear of loss, the forbidden nature of their growing closeness only made the pull between them stronger. They were two beings who should never meet, yet they were already intertwined, and the yearning between them had only just begun.
Dusk falls slowly over the forest, not as a curtain, but as a softening of the world, a tender dimming that seems to breathe against the skin. The protagonist pauses beneath the twisting branches, sensing that the air has thickened, as though something ancient is stirring from a sleep too deep to name. Shadows glide with a different weight now. Light clings to the edges of leaves with a trembling, watery delicacy. It is the moment before revelation, the held breath between two heartbeats when the forest decides whether to remain silent or open itself completely. The Kodama, who have watched from distances both near and infinite, begin to gather in the hush. Their presence is not seen at first, it is felt as a subtle pressure against the heart, a warmth rising from the moss, a shiver in the bark of a neighboring tree. Everything suggests motion without sound, attention without form. The protagonist steps forward, driven not by curiosity, but by a longing that has simmered unseen beneath their ribs since the first whisper of the forest called them. This longing pulses now with something more than desire. It carries the ache of recognition, the feeling of returning to a place they have never known, yet have always been meant to find. The trees tilt inward as though listening not to words, but to the tremor of emotion, the subtle vibration of a soul reaching towards something forbidden. Leaves, normally restless with wind, fall still. The forest arranges itself into a witness. Then a soft glow appears,
delicate as a drop of moonlight caught in the wrong hour. It hovers near the trunk of an ancient cedar. Another follows, then another, until the dusk is dotted with faint, trembling lights. They drift like exhaled breaths given shape, their pale luminance painting the air with threads of longing. The Kodama are revealing themselves, not fully, not in any human sense, but in the way a dream reveals its presence in the mind before its images form. They are emotion made visible, spirit made tender. The protagonist feels the forest's pulse synchronize with their own. It begins as a faint echo, a rhythm hidden beneath the rustle of ferns, then grows stronger, resonating through the soil and the stones. Every beat carries warmth upward, wrapping gently around their legs, hips, chest. They inhale, and the forest seems to inhale with them. It is emerging not in body, but in breath, in the silent space where two beings allow themselves to be vulnerable. The Kodama drift closer. Their light brushes the protagonist's skin like an intimate question, a request for permission. It is not touch, not truly, but a sensation that feels like the forest learning the shape of the one who stands before it. Every flicker carries intent. Every shift of glow feels like a confession. The protagonist closes their eyes, overwhelmed but open, and the Kodama respond instantly. Their lights intensify, shivering with a barely contained emotion that has no human name. As the boundary dissolves, the forest stirs in ways that defy the ordinary. The roots beneath the protagonist's feet vibrate with a deep, resonant hum, as though the earth is singing from within. Petals unfurl in the dimming light, blooming out of season. The branches arch overhead in a protective canopy. The air becomes warm and fragrant, carrying traces of cedar, rain, and something sweeter, a scent reminiscent of yearning itself. All of it moves in harmony with the protagonist's breath, each inhalation drawing the Kodama nearer, each exhalation loosening the last threads of the invisible barrier between worlds. Then, in a single moment of surrender, the Kodama reveal the fullness of their presence. They rise in number, encircling the protagonist, forming a sphere of trembling luminescence. Their glow deepens, shifting from pale silver to something warmer, richer. The light moves over the protagonist's skin, flowing like water, like fingers tracing contours with reverence. It becomes impossible to tell where the individual Kodama end and the collective spirit of the forest begins. The protagonist is enveloped in a cocoon of warmth, sensation, and ancient memory. Emotions not their own pour into them. The joy of the first spring leaves, the sorrow of old branches breaking under winter ice, the pride of nurturing creatures who never knew they were being watched, the loneliness of centuries spent unseen by human eyes. These emotions swirl through the protagonist like a living river, overwhelming yet strangely gentle, as if the forest is afraid of hurting the mortal heart that has dared to open itself. The Kodama carry these feelings carefully, offering them not as burdens but as gifts, fragments of truth. The protagonist responds not with words but with feeling, fear, wonder, longing, love, grief, hope. Each emotion bursts outward, and the forest mirrors it instantly. When fear rises, the lights dim slightly, offering space.
When wonder unfurls, the Kodama shimmer with softness. When longing grows sharp and sweet, the branches sway as though urging the moment deeper. And when love surfaces, quiet, trembling, undeniable, the Kodama press closer, their glow wrapping the protagonist in a luminous embrace.
This is the climax the myth has promised. A moment where spirit and mortal meet without shame or hesitation. It is sensual without being physical, intimate without needing flesh. It is the laying bare of essence. The protagonist feels themselves expanding and dissolving all at once, their heart stretching to hold the forest's ancient tenderness while also releasing its own long-locked vulnerability. It becomes unclear where the protagonist ends and the Kodama begin. The forest pulses around them, a living rhythm of emotional ecstasy. The lights peak in brightness. The air vibrates in waves. The protagonist feels weightless, suspended in a realm where desire and reverence blend into something purer than either. It is overwhelming, too much, and yet exactly right. Tears slip down their cheeks, and the Kodama respond with a soft surge of warmth, as though comforting them with the touch of 1,000 gentle hands made of light. Then, slowly, the moment begins to soften. The forest's pulse steadies. The Kodama's glow dims to its earlier subtle shimmer. The warmth recedes, but does not vanish. The protagonist feels the boundaries of their body return, the familiar shape of self settling back in. Yet everything remains changed. Something ancient has recognized them. Something eternal has touched them. Something forbidden has opened its eyes. The Kodama drift back a little, but not far. They linger, watchful, affectionate, as though reluctant to sever the connection completely. The protagonist breathes in the cooling air and feels the echo of the climax resonating deep within, a memory etched into heart and earth. The forest, once silent, now hums with a gentle afterglow, and in that warm, trembling quiet, both mortal and spirit know they have crossed a threshold that cannot be undone.
The forest holds itself in a deep, trembling stillness after the climax, as though reluctant to exhale too quickly and break the fragile echo of what has just transpired. The last races of Kodama light drift like fading sparks, brushing lightly against bark and leaf before dissolving into the dusk. The protagonist stands within the dim glow that remains, breathing softly, almost cautiously, as if their lungs are learning a new rhythm taught by the forest itself. Nothing outwardly dramatic has occurred, no violent storm, no collapse of trees, but the air is undeniably changed, dense with a resonance that feels like the pulse of a secret shared too intimately to ever fully fade. When the protagonist finally moves, their footsteps sound different. The earth welcomes them with a quiet, almost affectionate give beneath their soles. The moss glows faintly where they step, as though illuminated from within by the memory of the Kodama's light. It is subtle, barely noticeable, but enough to make the protagonist pause and test another step, watching the faint pulse shimmer before it fades. A mark, not carved into their skin, but woven into the way the world responds to them. They inhale deeply. The air slips into their chest, warm and heavy, filled with the scent of cedar and something
sweeter, perhaps the last remnants of the forest's yearning. Around them, the trees have shifted, not by moving, but by listening. Their trunks seem straighter, their branches angled minutely inward, embracing the space where the union occurred. Leaves tremble without wind, quivering with a sensitivity the forest never displayed before. And deep beneath the soil, the protagonist feels, not hears, the rhythm of roots adjusting, stretching, settling. A rearrangement, a rebalancing, as though the forest is redistributing its ancient breath to accommodate the new connection formed between spirit and mortal. The protagonist instinctively reaches out to the nearest tree. Their fingers hover just above the bark, and the air hums softly. The recognition is immediate, gentle, welcoming, cautious. When their skin finally meets the rough surface, warmth blooms through the bark, spreading slowly like ripples across a pond. It is not the intense intimacy of the Kodama's embrace, but a lingering echo of it, a quiet affirmation that the forest now carries a piece of the protagonist within its memory. The sensation brings a soft ache to their chest, bittersweet and beautiful.
The Kodama have not vanished entirely, though their luminous forms no longer circled the protagonist. Faint glimmers appear here and there, perched on branches or swaying among the ferns. They watch, not with the yearning they showed before, but with the calm, tender attentiveness of guardians. Their glow is softer now, dimmed in reverence to the transformation they helped create. One lingers longer than the rest, hovering close enough that the protagonist feels its presence as a featherlight brush against the cheek. A goodbye, perhaps, or a reassurance. The moment stretches, warm and nearly sorrowful, before the Kodama drifts back into the deep shadows, becoming one with the forest once more. A realization settles slowly within the protagonist. The union has altered them more deeply than they first understood. They feel emotions that are not entirely their own, subtle impressions of the forest's mood pressing gently against their mind. A flicker of contentment when they breathe calmly, a pulse of melancholy when their thoughts drift toward leaving, a quiet pride when they step lightly on the moss, careful not to disturb the smallest leaf. The awareness does not invade, but accompanies, a soft chorus harmonizing with their own inner voice. They have not become a spirit, but a bridge of sorts, a bearer of the forest's imprint. Yet, with this newfound bond, separation begins to assert itself. The brilliant heat of the union has cooled, transformed into a lingering warmth. The Kodama's presence no longer pulses urgently at the edges of perception. The forest senses it too. The moment they shared, fragile, impossible, overwhelming, cannot be sustained. It was a convergence meant for only a breath in the long span of time. Something sacred that must now settle, like water returning to a calm surface after a stone is cast. A heaviness grows in the protagonist, a gentle sorrow threaded with gratitude. They walk deeper into the forest, not searching for anything, but allowing their senses to absorb the changes. The trees greet them with quiet recognition. Ferns tilt slightly as they pass. The soft glow in the moss follows them like a slow sigh. All of it feels tender, intimate, yet tinged with the faint ache of distance returning.
The forest is guiding them toward acceptance. At the edge of a small clearing, the protagonist stops. The air here feels different, lighter, cooler, touched with the first hints of separation. Shadows stretch longer as night gathers fully, and the faint glimmers of Kodama light retreat into higher branches. The protagonist inhales, steadying themselves. The forest responds with a soft, sympathetic hum, like a gentle palm pressed to the heart. In the silence, a truth becomes clear. They have been changed, but they cannot remain suspended in the realm of spirits. The union was a moment of perfect alignment, and its beauty lies partly in its impermanence. The protagonist is still mortal, fragile, fleeting, bound to the rhythms of a life that moves differently than the forest's eternal pulse. To stay too long in this heightened intimacy would unravel the delicate balance that allowed the Kodama to reveal themselves in the first place.
The realization stings, but it also soothes. The forest does not push them away, it simply settles back into itself. The way a tide withdraws but leaves the memory of its touch shimmering along the sand. The protagonist lifts a hand to their chest, feeling the echo of warmth still pulsing there. The mark is invisible, yet unmistakably present, a thread of connection that will continue long after they leave these woods. As they turn to go, the ground beneath them brightens in a soft wave, a final acknowledgement. The faintly glowing moss outlines their path like a whispered blessing. In the branches above, one last Kodama flickers into view, a small light, trembling gently. It drifts downward, circling the protagonist once, twice, before brushing lightly near their shoulder. A farewell, intimate and quiet. Then it rises back into the canopy, melding into the shimmering patterns of leaves. The protagonist steps forward. The forest feels the movement and responds with a rustle that could be breeze or breath or emotion. The air shifts, the warmth fades. The connection loosens but does not break. By the time they reach the threshold where forest meets open sky, the Kodama's glow is only a memory, and the world beyond feels both familiar and strangely new. The protagonist pauses once more. They look back. The trees stand tall, still angled subtly inward, protective and reverent. The forest watches without watching, breathes without breathing, waits without expectation. And the protagonist, marked, transformed, quietly radiant, carries its resonance with them, a tender weight that settles beneath the ribs like a second heartbeat. When they finally step beyond the forest's edge, the night feels different, thinner, less alive. Yet a warmth lingers beneath their skin, a soft rhythm in their pulse that echoes with every distant memory of cedar, leaf, and light. They walk into the world changed, not in a way others will see, but in the way they will feel forever. They are no longer merely a visitor of the forest. They are part of its story now.
There are moments in life that leave traces deeper than memory.
moments that settle into the quiet folds of the heart, reshaping its rhythm long after the world has moved on. The encounter within the forest, the intimate union between mortal longing and spirit stillness, becomes one such moment for the protagonist. Yet, as days pass, as sunlight drifts across ordinary landscapes and night folds over rooftops instead of treetops, the experience begins to soften at its edges, not fading, never fading, but mellowing, becoming something warmer, steadier, easier to hold without trembling. It is in this softening that reflection blooms, gentle and persistent as moss reclaiming a fallen branch. The protagonist feels the days differently now. Their steps are lighter, their breathing deeper, their senses tuned to subtleties they once overlooked. A breeze brushes their cheek, and for a fleeting instant it feels like the shy approach of a Kodama glow. The rustle of leaves in a city tree carries an undertone of familiar emotion, like a memory tapping softly on the window of their awareness. Even the shadows hold a new kind of depth, as though spirit eyes may be watching from behind their curves. Nothing in the world has changed, and yet everything holds a quiet possibility it never held before. This new sensitivity is not a burden, it is a gift, but it is also a reminder of something fragile, something easily broken if taken for granted. The protagonist sees the world with the awareness that nature has its own heart, its own longing, its own patience. They begin to notice the marks humans leave without thinking: a cracked branch, a trampled path, a tree with its bark carved open. Each sign stirs a deep ache in their chest, for they understand now what damage truly means. They have felt the pulse of the forest's emotions. They know how even a small wound can echo endlessly through roots and branches. And so the myth widens inside them. It becomes more than their personal story. It becomes a lens through which they view the delicate balance between desire and restraint, between yearning and restraint. The Kodama taught them that intimacy with the natural world does not require possession or dominance. It requires listening, quiet, reverent, attentive listening. It requires patience. It requires honesty. Above all, it requires remembering that the forest feels. This understanding deepens each time the protagonist revisits the edge of those woods. They never cross fully into the depths again, not because they are unwelcome, but because some thresholds, once crossed and closed, are meant to remain sacred. Yet the forest still responds to their presence. The trees lean subtly, as if in silent greeting. The air thickens, warm with recognition. And in fleeting sparkles of light between the branches, the protagonist sometimes glimpses the faintest tremble of a Kodama glow. Not an invitation, not a promise, just a quiet acknowledgement that the bond remains. During one such visit, standing at the boundary where the forest meets open sky, the protagonist feels a shift inside themselves. A reflection, unbidden but clear, rises to the surface. The Kodama, with their patient watchfulness and wordless emotion, embody something essential: the truth that desire has a cost, and that connection always requires surrender. Spirits do not love the way humans do, yet they understand longing
more deeply than most mortals ever will. Their yearning is ancient, woven into bark and shadow, but their restraint is equally ancient. They reveal themselves only when the balance is perfect, when the mortal heart approaches with humility rather than hunger. The protagonist realizes that this balance, this fragile harmony, is the real core of the myth. It is not about merging with spirits. It is not about forbidden intimacy. It is about the awareness that the natural world holds its own emotions, waiting with eternal patience for moments when a human's heart beats in sympathy with its own. When that rare alignment occurs, something extraordinary can happen. A brief dissolving of boundaries, a soft collision of worlds. But such moments cannot be forced, nor repeated endlessly. They happen because they are meant to, and then they settle back into quiet memory. As the protagonist reflects, they find themselves thinking often of the Kodama's glow, the way it trembled with emotion, the way it responded to the slightest shift in their breath. That trembling becomes symbolic, a reminder of how delicate connections truly are, a reminder that beauty often exists in what is ephemeral, fleeting, impossible to hold. The most profound encounters leave no physical trace, but linger in the emotional landscape like soft footprints in snow. They also remember how the forest changed, subtly at first, then unmistakably. The warm pulse in the soil, the flowers blooming out of season, the way the air thickened like a lover leaning in. It strikes the protagonist now how much trust the forest must have given to allow such transformations. Trust born from centuries of waiting, from countless missed chances, from the rare warmth of a human approaching with a heart unshielded. This realization becomes another strand in the reflection weaving itself inside them, that nature offers its tenderness sparingly and only when approached with the reverence it deserves.
Over time, the protagonist becomes more attuned to these teachings. They move through the world with an awareness that every living thing holds a spirit, maybe not one with a face or a glow, but one with presence, memory, and sensitivity. They begin to treat parks like sanctuaries, trees like old companions, shadows like spaces to tread gently through. Even their interactions with people shift. They listen more deeply, speak more softly, and notice emotions the way they once noticed the Kodama's trembling light. The myth has changed them, but not in ways that isolate. Instead, it connects them more intimately with everything around them. Yet the myth also carries a touch of melancholy, as all truths about desire do. The protagonist understands that the closeness they shared with the Kodama will never exist in the same way again. The union was a moment of perfect convergence, fragile, extraordinary, unrepeatable. But melancholy does not diminish the experience. It enriches it. The bitter sweetness reminds them that the most powerful connections often live more in memory than in permanence. Sometimes, late at night, they sit by an open window and listen to the wind moving through distant trees. In those whispers, they hear echoes of the forest's breath, soft and familiar. They feel the faint warmth of their invisible mark pulsing gently beneath the ribs.
and they wonder, with a tenderness that curls like mist around the heart, whether the Kodama still think of them, whether the spirits ever pause in their ancient routines to recall the mortal who opened themselves so completely. The thought lingers, sweet and haunting, nurturing the addictive aftertaste the myth is meant to leave. For myths survive because they refuse to end. They survive because they invite the listener to imagine the next breath, the next shimmer of light, the next delicate crossing of realms. And so the protagonist, sitting beneath the night sky, feels the story continue, not through new encounters, but through the deepening reflection that shapes their understanding of the world. If they return to the forest, the Kodama may reveal themselves again, or they may not. Spirits follow rhythms older than longing, wiser than hope. But the protagonist knows now that presence does not depend on sight. The forest feels them, remembers them, carries them in its quiet pulse, and perhaps that is enough. The final truth settles gently. The Kodama still watch, still whisper, still feel. Their blow lives in every trembling leaf, every shifting shadow, every warm breath drifting through the cedar branches. Their patience is eternal, their tenderness subtle, their longing shared only with those who listen deeply enough to hear it. And somewhere in the dim heart of the forest, a soft light trembles, waiting for the next mortal whose heart beats in harmony with the ancient, fragile magic of the Kodama's world.